Hello and welcome to the No Holds Barred Witchcraft podcast. Now, there's this new thing. It's called, I think, paddle boarding, which isn't really a new thing because, like most new things, particularly most new ancient things, they're actually just things that go through phases of, becoming popular. Bit like fashion, Chris. 1 minute, one thing's super popular. The next minute, it's just for uncool people and grandmas. And then it comes around again, isn't then cool again. This thing I'm talking about today is bodyboarding, I believe it's called. Something like that, which is kind of like a surfboard, but you stand on it and you've got a paddle boarding. That was it, paddle boarding. Now, there are several people that do a paddle boarding in the river round by where I live. And every now and then, a big boat will come past and send a ripples out. And all the people that are not too great on the paddle boards fall off, don't they? Now, some people who fall off into the loud and resounding sea, that is not really a sea at all, is the astral. Sorry, it's going for a mundane explanation, won't I? Some people that fall off the paddle board into the water in the river think that this is some kind of an attack. They think that the big boat, because it's a big boat, going past, causing the ripples, causing everyone to fall off their, well, not everyone, the idiots that are fairly new that don't fully grasp how you actually paddleboard. They fall off. They cannot cope with the changing, the changing environment. But that is not an attack. An attack would potentially be if that boat were to drive into you when you're on your paddleboard directly on purpose. You'd probably know if it was an attack, but it may feel like an attack because of unwanted consequences to something or someone else's actions. Chris, how does that relate to the elephant in the room?
Sorry, just enjoying your analogy a little bit too much.
Also, are you one for paddle boarding, or do you just think it's a fad at the moment?
I think it's a fad.
Answer the question you think is most important first, please.
I think it's a fad.
Oh.
I think they should just learn to canoe like everybody else. If they want that experience.
Anything like that.
Yeah.
It's only a small river.
Far more useful skill than this paddle boarding.
Yeah, it is. You can go faster in a kayak than you can on a paddleboard, I'm pretty sure. I've not done paddleboarding, but I have done kayaking and I've done canoeing as well.
Also, you can't go down rapids in a paddleboard without breaking someone's neck.
That's also true.
You know? You can only go on still water with one of those paddle boards. Hence why the boat.
You could lie someone on a paddleboard, gaffer tape them to it so they could not move, and then throw them down rapids. That could be quite an interesting experience. Not too dissimilar from waterboarding, like what the CIA do.
I was going to say that does sound a lot more like waterboarding.
Yeah. Waterboarding does sound quite fun though, doesn't it?
It does. I do enjoy waterboarding. I do enjoy waterboarding people. That is one of my favourite works of being with the KGB.
Do they waterboard people at the KGB? I thought you just pulled off their
fingernails.
You've upgraded to waterboard. How humane, Chris.
I like a bit of that. I like a bit of all of it.
Oh, speaking of the KGB, you'll never guess what. I got banned from Facebook, like completely banned from Facebook, because I couldn't even like log in properly, not even on Messenger or anything like that, because of the KGB.
When?
Today.
What do you mean?
I had to go for a big appeals procedure because I made a post in 2021 that meant I posted nudity.
Did you?
graphic nudity I posted apparently in the year 2021, and the algorithms only just worked out that this nudity that I posted breaks the terms and conditions of the Facebook, and my account wasn't deleted, but it was locked. So I couldn't even properly log in. And I had to log in on the computer, go through all this thing of saying, yes, I did do it. Yes, I'd like to appeal it. And do you know what image it was that I got banned for posting?
What?
Something graphic and sexual, Chris.
Was it the one for the Tuesday night moot one?
No, out of all of the gay porn and stuff I've put on Facebook, it had nothing to do with that. And I don't post those. I get someone else from them who runs the Facebook pages and that, to post that. So that person would get banned, not me. Now, the thing that I posted, I believe, I'm not entirely sure, that the algorithm thought was a penis.
Okay.
However, what it actually was President Putin's face. But because it's somewhat, I don't know, fireman's helmet shaped.
Okay.
And it's quite close up, I suppose the algorithm must have thought either Mr. Putin's face was indeed a member, not a member of the KGB like you, a member as in a male member, a penis, right?
Okay.
Or it must have meant that, like,
it's finally recognised that it's a giant cock.
Extremely sexual and far too much for the Facebook. I presumed it had something to do with your friends, the KGB, that they didn't like.
They'll have just realised that Putin is just a giant cock. That's all. Right, back to the point. You made some vague reference to waterboarding. Prior to that, you asked me about standing on boards not being a good idea, and fads.
Hey, I'm not saying it's not a bad idea. I think if you want to go not waterboarding, I'm going to keep fucking saying that now. If you want to go paddleboarding, you know, it's summerish time. It's still quite nice out, sunny out and that. Go for it. But when some big thing comes along and knocks you off, I don't know whether you should be getting upset and thinking it's an attack, because it shows a lack of knowledge of your environment, the environmental factors, that if a big boat comes along, there's a wake. Not a wake as in someone's died, a wake as in the wake, the water, you know. It's going to get a little bit dramatic all of a sudden because a bigger shift. And I was wanting you, Mr. Chris, to eloquently take what I've said, which is somewhat cryptic, and make it less cryptic and talk about the elephant that is currently in the room.
I will do this.
We're not talking about your brother now.
No. Rude. That was mean. What I can kind of get what you're trying to say. Obviously, I know what you're trying to say, but to kind of put it for them would be, there has been some ruffling of feathers occurring in a number of practitioners' practices. Obviously, Witchcraft Live and the No Holds Barred group, which I'm hoping people listening to this are actually on and are experiencing and are actually sharing alike. In those groups, they like to make their assumptions and their big theories. What I would like to just put in there before we get on to the actual matter is that these are both groups that me and Liam built in order to encourage a sharing kind of witchcraft. Well, one's about sharing, one's about taking the piss. Obviously, the one that's about taking the piss is named after this here show. So that one is more about you kind of venting your frustrations in various different ways with new and cryptic things that you've discovered in witchcraft, and then trying to either tear them apart or build them up in that space. Witchcraft Live is our kind of community where a whole group of practitioners, because if you're in there and you're not a practitioner, you really shouldn't be in there.
Get the fuck out.
Get the fuck out. What actually should be happening is you should be absorbing, practicing, and when you feel ready, which hopefully sooner rather than later, that you'll share more about your practice, and then people that have been around a little bit longer can pitch in too, and you can all learn from each other. So obviously the content we put out is all about you learning from us, but these groups are designed for you to learn from each other, having received the information from us in various different ways that you can kind of share alike. And I think on the whole that works. Sometimes it can become a bit too much of an echo chamber occasionally, but I think ultimately it's probably one of the best groups on the internet, on Facebook or whatever, for practitioners actually doing shit, and actually learning and actually progressing, rather than everyone, metaphoric or dick waving and everyone bowing to their every word. So, I think it's a dynamic space that should be enjoyed. However, there are sometimes assumptions made that we are somehow doing something covertly, like me and Liam have the time. Bearing in mind we give so much time to this kind of free content, etc., that we have time to go and create non-public things for you to all compete in.
No, we have things to do that for us, don't we?
Of course. One thing is they forget that there are 3 in this relationship, not 2. And obviously that third person is Thoth and is a silent partner, but, that's only the agreement with us. It doesn't mean that they can't get involved elsewhere. Is partly something to consider, that actually, we may not have done it, but another entity may have got involved in your personal lives. None of our interest and none of our business.
It will come up at the AGM if it's super big stuff, though, no doubt.
Exactly. If it starts to get unruly and we have to have a managers meeting, then we'll do so. But ultimately, we are not about impacting your individual lives outside of your mentoring program, if that's what you're in. The platforms that we create are specifically for you to enjoy, to share, and for you to really have as best a community as possible, compared to what is available out there in the other kind of kiss ass Me Too's kind of places full of memes everywhere else. So yeah, back to the elephant. The elephant being that there's been a problem with a number of individuals, people that are all actually actual practitioners that we are aware of. And it may have been happening to others. We just weren't aware because you weren't engaged with the mentoring program or you weren't sharing, which, bearing in mind, that is what Witchcraft Live is for. So if you're not sharing, you can't be talking shit about us in the background.
But so many people love to talk shit about us, Chris, and are too scared to say it to our faces.
But you all know that I love telling people they're wrong, or correcting people. It's my raison d'etre. It's the reason I exist. Anyway, there has been this kind of backlash of suggesting that we were involved. I can categorically say we weren't. Whether or not our silent partner was is very different. But I really liked the analogy you gave, Liam, of this kind of big ship going through. And now that big ship isn't necessarily meaning to attack you. It didn't notice you were there. But as something passed, the ripples of its presence are seen. So, depending on how small a fish you are or how small a bodyboard or whatever it is that you're on, compared to the thing that goes past, will mean that you will feel the presence of its wake.
Balance.
That's not, we're not exempt from that. If something bigger than us was to go by, we would feel its presence. It's partly
Anything,
why. It's partly
anything
why.
big that's going on, you feel the presence. It's whether you allow it to affect you, of course, or whether you see it coming when you look down that river and think, oh, look, there's a boat coming. It hasn't got to me yet, but when it does, things are going to get a bit turbulent.
And that if you can see it coming, you can prepare for the impact.
Yeah, that's what astrologers are supposed to do, innit? But they always seem to do it retrospectively, from my experience. And say, look, that thing that just happened that no one warned you about, well, it's been in the stars all along.
So there's kind of two important bits there, which is one, accepting that you're not an island, that actually you cannot pretend, even if you put the biggest walls up around you as a practitioner, you can't pretend that you are not part of the rest of the ecosystem, and that if something much bigger than you comes by, you are going to feel its presence. The second part is to kind of say, if you don't feel its presence, then you've automatically know you've got a problem there, which is that you don't have enough psychic ability and you haven't developed yourself enough to be knowledgeable of those things. Now, the downside to any practice, or I don't know, downside is probably too harsh. The downside to practice is that you will bring attention. So, if you're working, regardless of how much energy you're working with, depending on the size of that thing that's going by, you will screech louder than something else, because even someone that's practicing on a really low level is going to glow a little bit more than a mundane is. And it's going to, obviously, the further up that ladder you get, the brighter that you're going to shine elsewhere, which is why we talk.
Whether you're trying to hide it or not.
Yeah, regardless of what you're covering up or not covering up, because just because you think you're hidden doesn't mean that thing isn't big enough to have the more higher technology of you used to protecting against sonar and hiding behind the occasional solid mass. When they've then got a higher technology of actually looking, which means they're not reliant on echoes bouncing back, and are going for a more technically advanced scan, then we're going to be talking about the fact that actually you are going to be noticed, because just because you've upped your technology doesn't mean you've upped it to the level that something bigger than you is looking from. Because again, we talk about it a lot of you seem to miss it. It's all about perspective. So like Liam says, that little boat going by, you're going to feel that ripple because you're on a tiny little raft. If that then happened to be a cruise liner that went past, you might be capsized. That's the difference. The perspective that's there will mean that will vary from size to size of the interaction between those two things. So, where was I planning to go with that, Liam? The next bit.
Environmental changes and what that boat really is.
So, environmental changes will be that you should be making sure that you are the most aware in your environment. That means my rant that I make every time we talk about almost anything to do with magic is making sure that you have your regular cleanses and your grounding techniques, and that you are constantly working on your awareness in order to be best prepared for when something new comes into your environment, whether or not that be a positive new or a negative new. The fact that something new has entered your environment, you should be aware of it. Now, the size of that thing and what that thing is will all depend. At the moment, there's clearly what we're experiencing is actually the minor ripples of something much, much bigger.
Yeah.
And what you're potentially going to have to deal with, those of you that are actually more able, is that if you're appearing on anybody's radar at all, which means you only need to be above the mundane, and practicing even the most basic magic, you are going to be potentially starting to feel the ripples of a big movement. That doesn't mean that you've come into contact with the main player. What you're talking about is where the kind of, what are they called when you talk about earthquakes? They foreshocks?
I don't know. I was
This is
thinking
where we need
more
☍𝕘𝕣.
those computer games where you have like the boss at the end of the level.
Yeah. And it starts, the controller starts vibrating before you've even seen it.
We might be showing our age, though. I don't think they do that nowadays, do they? Don't know.
No, only in things like Donkey Kong and stuff like that, I think is what we're talking about. Where the music starts playing, slightly sounds more techno, and the controller starts vibrating. You're like, oh, fuck, now the boss is coming. Yeah, we're talking about foreshocks at this point. That means that you're going to be experiencing more and more interest, regardless of what level you are playing at. And I think that's something that needs to be recognised and not blamed on me or Liam.
But that's the easy thing to do, Mr. Chris, is to blame it on the faustiest witches in all the land. If there's something fausty going on, surely it must be the fausty witches. Although you would expect would-be witches to understand how dangerous these witch hunts can be and the serial arc and what it can lead to. But some people don't know their history, Chris, do they? And other people, such as the, is it the woke people? Is that what they're called now? The people that think they understand an issue and take a very extremist view on that issue to solve that issue, but don't end up solving the issue. That's another thing, though, altogether. So we probably should let's skirt over that one. Don't want to offend more people. So we've got like less than 10 minutes left. Is there anything else you'd like to publicly state? Did the archivist kill the queen in the end? Did we get to the bottom of that one?
No, we'll find out this week, I imagine.
Okay, all right.
So, and let's not bring that up. I'm still a bit emotional about it all. So, one lizard to another. We're always mindful of one another's existence.
Oh, don't. The conspiracy theorists will start now.
So yeah, I think the big issue will always be people actually considering where the impact is. Are they prepared for it? And this isn't what I want to kind of point out before it goes over to the actual Patreon side, particularly because if you're this side and you don't pay for Patreon for the extra, this is going to sound like a real proper like tin hat kind of conspiracy episode where we're talking about some big bad coming that we don't know. They'll be chalking us up next to the evangelicalists.
What, the end is nigh, Chris?
The end is nigh. The end is nigh.
The end of what, though? It's not the end of all, though, is it? It's only the end of certain things.
Yes,
certain
like the Americas. Sorry, I couldn't help it. So yeah, I don't want it to be too kind of, doom and gloom of the end is nigh. What I want you to kind of take away, if you're one of the practitioners that are only going to hear this side, is the fact that actually you need to remember that if you're practicing beyond the kind of Pinteresty, Wiccan-esque, neo-pagans, then you kind of need to get to the point where you need to realize that you will be, even if your practice is only slightly above them, going to glow and and be seen beyond what a mundane person will be. And that means that you will have more occurrences of things coming and being interested in you. You know, like these, I want to use another water-based reference, Liam. You know, sharks are known for occasionally biting a human, but very few eat a human in whole, because actually they don't like the taste of us and actually thought we were a seal. So they take one bite and they go away. That may seem tragic and world shattering to that individual that's lost a leg or really, really got a nasty, nasty scar. But ultimately, it wasn't looking for you. You just happened to be there. Which is where I kind of have trouble with the word attack. Because attack says that there was some premeditation involved and that it was directed at you. And like with Liam's analogy of the boat coming by, there is that aspect of, was it actually directed at you? Were you just in the wrong place at the wrong time? Are you just receiving the brunt force of something is passing just because it was bigger than you? You know, a giant walks through a village. It is no different than when you accidentally walk through a grassland and stamp all the grass down. You don't personally have an issue with the grass. It just wasn't as big in your view, and it was just part of the way that you were going. Have I got too cryptic again?
Cause and effect. Now, some people will know, as Mr. Chris probably remembers, some people will know that in the UK, I'm famous, right? Because I was in the paper for something water related. Yeah. Now, I didn't swim the channel or anything like that. There was this big flood that happened, Somerset Levels, right? Big flood. It was kind of biblical because there was gravestones and houses and all sorts underwater. It was like the Sea of Atlantis, Crest, but kind of if they turned the valve off halfway through. It was kind of only half sunk, you know. They got all the downstairs in all the villages, but not many of the upstairs, right?
Okay.
So in this big flood, a lot of people didn't necessarily see it coming, which that's fair enough if you didn't see it coming. Could it have happened? Yes, it could have happened. People don't plan for that sort of thing because it didn't happen within a certain people's lifetimes, you see. So I mean, that happens every, I don't know, 100 years or so, potentially. But during this big flood, I had to drive my van through a flooded bit, and there was a man with Wellington boots. He was walking along in the middle of the fucking road. Did I mow him down? No. But I had to continue going, because otherwise I'd have been fucked, because you have to keep going through a big puddle, don't you? Otherwise the engine will cut out. And I went past him, and I may have splashed him. Now, I didn't splash him on purpose, although I'm glad I did splash him because he was a prick. Unfortunately, the TV crews and the journalists and that were taking pictures there, and they got pictures of me splashing him and also him using his little shopping bag to hit the side of my van over and over again. It did end up in the papers, which everyone thought was absolutely hilarious. And luckily, my boss didn't sack me at the time. He just thought that it was funny. But here we go. We have potentially him thinking that I did that on purpose. Did I splash him on purpose? No, I needed to get there. And I'm perfectly happy to splash someone if it means my van not cutting out, you see. Now, other bigger things, like the Somerset Levels itself, did the water itself know the spirits of the water and such? Did that know that it was washing away all of these villages and stuff? I suppose you'll have to ask an animist. I don't know. The point is that there's cause and effect that we need to remember, but that we are all linked in many, many different ways to the environment or environments that we are a part of and we are in. And I'd like to go into that further magically in the Patreon.